It's so funny because people always ask me, oh, what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, I'm a full-time PhD student. And they're like, that's great, but what do you do for work?
Welcome to Learning from Experience, a podcast for college students and recent grads who want to hear directly from alumni on how they've adjusted their lives post-graduation, including stories of success, career readiness, and tips for navigating the real world. Created by the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Arizona State University. I'm your host, Megan Finnerty, and today I'm talking with Alyssa Macomber. She graduated from ASU in 2019 with 2 degrees in psychology and neuroscience, and now is a PhD candidate in clinical neuropsychology at Northwestern University. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. Yeah, so I'm 25 and I am from Arizona. After graduating from ASU, I moved to Chicago to be a clinical neuropsychology doctoral student at Northwestern University, where I am studying aging and dementia under the mentorship of Dr. Geffen.
Awesome. Well, explain to me, what is neuropsychology? What are things that you're researching?
So neuropsychology wants to relate the brain and behavior through cognitive testing. I have been blessed to have experiences from 4 different research labs in the past 5 years of starting my career. I conduct research in the aging and dementia space. It's really, really interesting and powerful stuff. Aging and dementia is becoming a lot more prevalent and recognized. And we have so much support here at the Muslim Center for Cognitive Neurology and Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So our laboratory for translational neuropsychology is interested in correlating cognitive or behavior symptoms shown pre-mortem in the clinic from a comprehensive neuropsychological battery to post-mortem neurodegenerative disease markers from donated brains. So our research center has the opportunity to see patients with Alzheimer's disease alongside several other dementias.
Well, I bet a lot of students right now at ASU or around the country are wondering, should I pursue a PhD? Explain to me about how you came to that decision. Did you always want one, or is it something that you figured out later in your years at college?
Yeah, absolutely not. I had no idea what a PhD was. I am first generation, so I knew I wanted to go to college, and I was obsessed with learning and being a student. A fun fact, I actually picked psychology as my first degree because I was interested in forensic psychology from watching too many episodes of Criminal Minds. But as I was going through my first 2 years in undergrad, ASU offered neuroscience as a major. So I was super excited because I knew I was interested in more of the biological aspects of the brain compared to going into therapeutic psychology careers, such as like therapy. So I decided to get 2 degrees. So in my junior year, I came across WINYER, which is a program designed to provide research opportunities for underrepresented students in neuroscience. And when I was accepted into this program, I left my jobs of being a bank teller and a restaurant server to becoming a researcher. I joined 2 labs, one focusing on the neurobiological aspects of Alzheimer's disease in mouse models, and the other one focusing on the aging aspects of autism spectrum disorder. I started to learn about what a PhD was and what it would take to get one. I always had this vision of working in a hospital, but I knew in my heart that med school was just not for me. I spent months researching loopholes to have a career where I could be recognized as a doctor, work in a hospital, but not have to go through the process of medical school. And I also knew I wanted to just focus on the brain. And if I went to medical school, this would only happen when I specialize. So between the WINYER program, my research labs, and me researching every higher education job that was somewhat relative to my field, I found neuropsychology. To become a clinical neuropsychologist, you either need a doctor of psychology or a doctor of philosophy, along with 1-year internship and 2 years of postdoctorate training. So the process typically takes 7 years, and I am in year 1.
So conducting research is only one part of being a PhD candidate, right? Can you explain to me the other steps about being in a PhD program?
Definitely. I think that understanding all the components of getting a PhD and what it takes to get there is really important. The first one is the traditional coursework component that is typically more of a seminar style with your small cohort. The second is the clinical component where you will see a wide variety of patients. And in my case, I really focus on neuropsychology cases. And then the third is the research component, as you were saying, where you will defend your dissertation depending on what research you are interested in.
Okay, so once you decided med school was not for you and you started looking into other opportunities outside, how did you start the process of finding a PhD program and applying?
Yeah, so speaking on this process of getting into a PhD program is so important to me. It really takes patience, persistence, and grace. Graduate programs are becoming more competitive every year, and many people say getting into a clinical psych PhD program is just as competitive as med school. So a huge requirement that has changed for PhD applications is that a master's degree is no longer required. People typically need to pay for a master's degree, and I knew I did not want to do that, especially after just graduating from my undergrad. So again, I found a loophole and realized that grad programs really look for research experience and success in publications. There are also many other aspects of the application process that is considered, and expectations are changing since the pandemic. But when I was graduating from ASU, I knew I needed more research experience at a higher level to bypass that master's degree. So I applied to over 100 research assistant jobs all over the country, even international. And I landed an amazing opportunity to work at UC San Diego, which is one of the main hubs for neuropsychology. And I worked under a very successful neuropsychologist on Alzheimer's biomarkers. I was the lead research assistant on a project and worked there through the pandemic for about 3 years. I applied to clinical psychology PhD programs in 22. And after going through a couple of interviews, I didn't find the right fit. And this is where the patient part really kicks in. So application seasons are draining and only happen once a year. So I took one more year to work and publish before applying again. And this cycle, I received 10 interviews and 5 offers. It was the most incredible outcome, and I'm so thankful. And after months of making my final decision, I committed to Northwestern University.
I'm so thankful that you're sharing this process and just being open with us about it, because you shared that you had a lot of research experience while you were here at ASU. But the way that the new path is that still wasn't enough. Who did you have surrounding you, kind of helping you navigate this path moving forward?
Yeah, so the Winner program was very helpful for me. Dr. Niswander, she was awesome in helping me push and write letters of recommendation and giving me opportunities to go to conferences. But it really just came down to, my own research, trying to figure out, how do I get to this next level? A lot of my friends were not in the STEM field. And, I watched a lot of YouTube videos on what neuropsychology is and how do I get there and what are the requirements. It took a lot of my own research. And after you're going through the application process, you're starting to learn, what it really takes and what they are actually looking for. And so by, that second round, I really became an expert on the application process.
How do you decide between 5 offers?
Yes. Well, for me, I really, really, really prioritize where I live. And so I only applied to places where I live because, like I said, I'm 25, and a huge, huge, huge factor is work-life balance. I want to be able to, enjoy where I'm living and enjoy my 20s. And so I only applied to places where I could see myself, having fun on the weekends and making, friends and exploring and being in a place where it's accessible to travel. So that really narrowed down the list for me. But once I was able to lay out all my options between my 5 offers, it really comes down to the research and the lab that you are going to be working in. My mentor is amazing, and that relationship with your mentor is so important. It's a lifelong relationship. Also, the emphasis on clinical work as well. Typically, a lot of programs, want you to become a academic researcher and stay in academia and research, where, there's some other programs like Northwestern where they really do put a lot of emphasis on clinical work, which is really important to me because my long-term goal is to be a clinical neuropsychologist. So there's just a lot of different factors that you kind of have to decipher from.
Well, you mentioned work-life balance and that is important to you. Talk to me about how you maintain that.
Day-to-day life as a graduate student is something I hope I can, have more platforms to talk about because it's so important and it's often overlooked. It's also very important to note that a lot of programs, especially clinical psychology PhD programs, they pay you. So they are paying for your tuition and you are also getting a stipend because it really is a full-time job. I always laugh when people are like, oh, what do you do, for work? And I'm like, oh, I'm a full-time PhD student. They're like, yeah, but what do you do for work? It's over 40 hours a week. It's a never-ending, process. You can constantly be learning. So, finding time to turn that off is really important to me. Some of my side passions outside of being a student are bodybuilding, nutrition, so a lot of meal preparations, international travel, having multiple streams of income, so working, second jobs, and being a fiance, being an older sibling, and the list goes on. So with that being said, you really have to find time to turn off being a student and find things that, make you happy. Like for me, that is exercise. Maybe for, other people, that is reading or gaming or whatever that is. You have to incorporate that and make that into your daily routine. Otherwise, you can, get carried away in being a student and this being your job.
So after you made the decision to pursue a PhD, how'd you make your next decision, which is picking your specific topic of research or the field that you're interested in? I know that you're focused on aging, dementia, or neurodegenerative diseases.
Yeah, so everybody ages, right? There's no escaping aging. And I always say that, older adults are our best teachers. I have personal relationships with people in my family, specifically my grandpa, where he is my light. He's my life. So, I started finding opportunities in research and I really came across, Alzheimer's disease, specifically. And I just, really felt a deep passion for helping these people, helping their families specifically. It's such a terrible disease. And you think about this person has lived an entire life. And at the end, they can't even remember it. They can't even remember their loved ones. It's really, really, really sad. And we're at such a pivotal time within this research and the support that we are, getting to pursue this research. So I just found that, it was a very interesting field. There's so much to be learned, so much to do, so many novel techniques that you can take. And so what I've learned so far from, my work with just being with these patients is, aging doesn't just have to be decay, that there is so much more growth and life to be lived, and that there's, really hope to try to cure this disease. And that is everybody's main goal that is, doing research in the aging space, is to not only prolong life, but to make life more meaningful at the ending stages.
That's really beautiful and very important work that you do. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you to Alyssa for sharing your story with us. It was great advice and insight for someone considering, should I pursue a PhD and the neuroscience field? You can connect with her on social media or over email. Her email is alyssa.macomber, MACOMBER @northwestern.edu, or on Twitter at Alyssa_neuro.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
To hear more alumni advice, head to our episode page wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out the college's YouTube channel or visit thecollege.asu.edu/LFE podcast. See you next time.